So this slide provides an overview of what I will present today. First, I will talk a little bit about funded activities, then reporting requirements, the OLEP Provincial Advisory Committee, or what I call them PAC, and then we'll open the floor to any questions you have on the information presented. If we don't get to all of your questions that are raised today, we will connect with you via email in the coming days and provide you with a response. So let's begin. So as noted, the first item on today's presentation agenda is OLEP funded activities. So federal funding supports all forms of French education in Alberta. Francophone education, also referred to as minority language education in Alberta, supports Section 23 rights holders and is taught nearly 100% in French. The provision of federal funding for minority language or Francophone education is based on Section 23 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Among other things, this section imposes an obligation on government to mobilize resources to preserve and promote minority language education. It also grants the right to an educational experience in minority language educational facilities that is substantively equivalent to that provided in majority language educational facilities. The provision of federal funding for French as a second language instruction is based upon a vision for a bilingual Canada. This vision is clearly identified in the federal government's action plan for official languages. Within Alberta, French immersion and French as a second language vary in their amount of instruction taught in French. French immersion is mostly taught in French with the intent of creating bilingual students in English and French. French as a second language is a standalone French course taught in English schools. But I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir and you guys all know that already. So let's move on to the next slide. As announced last year, for the 2021-22 and 2022-23 fiscal years, Alberta will be allocating equal amounts of federal funding to Francophone education and French second language instruction. This decision to change the funding allocations was not taken lightly. It was preceded by extensive consultations of French, minority language, and French as a second language key stakeholders, namely through Alberta's OLEP Provincial Advisory Committee, whose members have also held their own discussions with a variety of school authorities and education organizations outside of our formal meetings. Francophone education is still in a building or a catching up stage with the goal of combating assimilation. Francophone schools have the additional role of service as a community hub and the continuum of education, which includes daycares, preschool programs, and full-day kindergarten, which play an essential role in protecting and preserving the vitality of Francophone schools and the community. Section 23 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms outlines rights that grant Alberta's Francophonie the right to an educational experience in minority language educational facilities that is substantively equivalent to that provided in majority language education facilities. We have a legal obligation to provide equitable outcomes and equal opportunity that at times requires differential treatment in order to achieve equality of results. The department has taken steps to ensure federal funding is allocated amongst all school authorities, post-secondary institutions, and select educational partners providing FSL programming in a more equitable manner that enhances collaborative opportunities wherever possible. So Alberta's portion of regular funding, which is identified in both the protocol and the bilateral agreement, this is divided between minority language Francophone education and French second language instruction, and each of those respective portions is divided between education and advanced education as shown. So a PDF version of this chart detailing how Alberta distributes OLEP funding for the 2021-22 school year is now available on the OLEP webpage in the funded activities section. For French minority language education, the regular funding that goes to Alberta education is further divided, with $55,000 going to the Individual Teacher Bursary Program, or ITB, and just over $6 million going to the Francophone regional authorities as student FTE funding and project funding. It is important to note that the amount going to the ITB program has been lowered for 2021-22 as participation in teacher professional development has been lower due to COVID-19. The aim is to return the amount available in the ITB program for Francophone teachers to $80,000 by 2022-2023. I will provide more information about the ITB program later in this section. The 4 French minority language authorities in Alberta collaborate with the Fédération de Conseils Scolaires Francophones de l'Alberta, or FCSFA, in designing and implementing the initiatives included in the Alberta Action Plan. And now we're going to go into our first of the OLEP project video stories. As Julie mentioned, we reached out to funding recipients of regular project funding and asked them to prepare a short video that shares the story of their project and shows us how the funding enhances Francophone, French immersion, and FSL programming in the province. We'll start with the video story from the Greater North Central Francophone Education Region, which will share information about how OLEP project funding enriches Francophone education in Alberta.
Le programme des langues officielles permet au Conseil scolaire du Centre-Nord d'embaucher une équipe de travail d'intervenants scolaires communautaires au sein de toutes nos écoles du Conseil scolaire. Le programme nous permet aussi de faire l'embauche d'une coordination pour cette équipe de travail. Chaque mois, les équipes des intervenants scolaires communautaires se rencontrent pour parler de leur projet. Le réseautage entre eux est super important pour l'amélioration de nos projets. Le Conseil scolaire du Centre-Nord offre des formations sur une base régulière à cette équipe de travail pour continuer de se perfectionner dans l'animation, dans l'organisation d'événements ainsi que dans l'évaluation de nos projets. Les intervenants ont été très innovateurs pendant la pandémie dans l'élaboration de leur programmation avec leur direction cette année.
Bonjour, Michel Lapointe, je suis le directeur de l'école Claudette et l'Unité Tardif à Sherwood Park. Nous, cette année, on est à notre 6e année d'école et c'est notre 5e année que nous avons l'ISC à notre école. Et le programme l'ISC a vraiment un impact sur la vie de nos élèves. Ça augmente vraiment la vitalité de notre école, l'implication de nos élèves dans la communauté et dans l'école. Toutes les activités que notre ISC travaille avec eux dans l'organisation, la coordination avec les enseignants ou les membres communautaires sont vraiment là pour bonifier notre programmation scolaire.
L'exemple d'activités qu'on fait à notre école, pour Noël, on avait fait un spectacle préenregistré, donc les élèves pouvaient envoyer des vidéos de eux filmés à la maison, de leur talent. Les familles pouvaient aussi participer, donc on a pu collaborer avec l'extérieur de l'école aussi. On a aussi fait une expo-science un peu dans le même sens. Les élèves ont pu préparer une expo-science à la maison et s'enregistrer avec la collaboration de leurs parents ou frères et sœurs ensemble et à façon virtuelle. On a aussi une artiste en résidence pour le mois de la francophonie qui est venue faire des projets d'art sur la francophonie, sur le drapeau francophone à l'école. Il y a eu l'émission spéciale de Génie en herbe, donc on a des élèves ici à l'école qui ont préenregistré des questions qui ont été diffusées à la radio et ensuite nos classes ont joué, il y avait un concours organisé par Radio Cité.
Les projets des intervenants scolaires communautaires ont comme objectif d'apporter une vitalité à la vie étudiante et un sens d'appartenance à la francophonie et sa communauté. Un grand rôle justement des intervenants est de faire le pont entre la communauté et l'école. Merci au programme des langues officielles pour votre appui au projet et toutes nos équipes écoles qui contribuent au projet de la construction identitaire.
I would like to again say thank you to the Greater North Central for preparing the video and sharing this information. Again, if there are any questions about the FCSFA's project activities, please do not hesitate to reach out and we can connect you with the FCSFA to answer your questions. Or again, please feel free to post them in the chat box. So moving on, for French second language, the regular funding that goes to Alberta education is further divided with $155,000 going to the ITB, $20,000 goes towards the Quebec Student Exchange Program, and just over $5 million goes towards student FTE funding and approximately $826,000 towards project funding. As with the minority language ITB allocation, the amount going to the program has been lowered for 2021-22 as participation has been lowered due to COVID-19. Again, the aim is to return the amount available in the ITB program for French immersion and FSL teachers to $220,000 by 2022-23. The Department of Education has already provided on our OLEP webpage the annual allocation of federal funding for each school authority and independent school for the following school year using the student FTE calculations, which were finalized in February prior to the upcoming school year. As of 2020-2021, second language funding rates per FTE funded student are on a sliding scale. This means that student authorities with a lower number of FTE funded students will receive slightly more per FTE funded student. This is to ensure school authorities with smaller French immersion programs and French as a second language courses receive adequate funding for their programs. The sliding scale and specific FTE rates will be available in the 2021-22 funding manual for school authorities. I will admit that this section of the funding manual was delayed due to the delay in finalizing the Canada-Alberta Agreement for Minority Language Education and Second Language Instruction for fiscal years 2021 through 22-23. Now that this agreement has been ratified, Section F of the funding manual will be updated. So moving back to the chart before us, in order to provide value, allocations less than $1,000 in student FTE funding will not be issued and instead will be redistributed to remaining participating school authorities and independent schools. As of 2020-21, Alberta Education has shifted a larger allocation of regular funding from projects over to the student FTE model, which will provide school authorities with more flexibility in managing their own initiatives and enable them to collaborate with regional school authorities with common interests at their own discretion. The selection of projects to receive funding was made based upon previously granted projects that have shown significant success over the last several years, or proposals that were submitted for complementary funding that showed significant promise and were not approved at the federal level. Additionally, these projects extend beyond the regular operations of the school authority or organization. They seek to advance or enhance French immersion and/or French as a second language instruction. They are collaborative, meaning they involve multiple school boards or educational organizations or post-secondary institutions. They meet current needs across the province, and they are far-reaching, providing support to school authorities across large regions and/or the entire province. Alberta Education plans to revise the allocation of project funding with the new protocol, which is expected to commence in fiscal year 2023-24. We will now hear from regular OLEP project funding recipients on the French immersion and FSL side. We will watch all 5 video stories. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or hold them until the end of the session. Our first video is provided by the Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia.
Hello. On behalf of ARPDC, it's my pleasure in these next 4 minutes to provide a quick summary of our work this year. In addition to the 91 professional learning opportunities in French immersion support and 17 professional learning opportunities focused on supporting French as a second language, we have engaged in a number of major projects and pilot projects to further support educators, students, and families in consultation with our French language advisory committees, which meet regionally in each of the consortia across the province. Sessions supported literacy, numeracy, assessment, language acquisition, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit ways of knowing, including the translation of materials, such as empowering the spirit and pedagogical practice across K-12, though there tends to be more K-9 sessions than 10-12, reflecting the number of programs in those levels. Learning opportunities were primarily delivered online in this COVID-impacted year in 1 to 2 hour blocks, most frequently after school or as part of division professional learning days. Our French immersion resources site, which you just saw, was a major project of the year with over 45 teachers involved in the uploading of over 2,000 files with lessons, units, activities, assessments, and resources for their fellow teachers to access. The site went live in late January, and as of April 30th, there have been over 50,000 hits, the majority from Alberta, but the site has been accessed by teachers across the world. Our Francophone Consortium additionally developed an amazing site made available to immersion teachers across the province in support of physical education, with dozens of resources for the classroom, gym, and outside. We've engaged bookstores and authors in a series of book talks, some presented just to teachers, showcasing a range of books across the grades that they might consider for their classroom libraries, and others presented to students with authors sharing their work, like David Bouchard shown here in the video, sharing their work, the craft of storytelling and writing with students in the class. Some of these are fully recorded, others presented live with student-author interaction, enhancing all aspects of French language acquisition. In an effort to support cultural knowledge acquisition and language skills in light of COVID's impact on the opportunity to travel, we have undertaken a project that saw us contract with a tour company in Quebec to record walking tours of sites students would normally have visited in grade 8, 9, 12 student trips to Quebec. The tours are recorded and presented in French, though through a Zoom meeting, with the tour guide pausing the recording periodically and engaging the class live in Zoom for questions and conversations about what they have seen. We see this project having great potential, as not all students have the chance to travel, even before COVID, but can experience a taste of what they would see in their classroom through this opportunity. The tour guide is an educator who passionately leads these tours and engages the students in conversation. Finally, we are working on a 2-day summer institute for French language learning, primarily focused on French immersion, but with a stream of French as a second language sessions as well for August 23rd and 24th. On behalf of the members of ARPDC, thank you for all of your support.
So the next video is provided to us by the French Language Resource Center, which is located in Grande Prairi.
Bonjour, my name is Diana Pauvert. I am the director of the French Language Resource Center in Grande Prairi. The center has been receiving OLEP project funding for the past 15 years. It was initiated by an informed parent of Canadian Parents for French who believed that a partnership between Northwestern school boards and different organizations such as the ACFA and Canadian Parents for French would greatly benefit the students learning French in this area. In 2004, Peace Wapiti School Division, Grande Prairi and District Catholic Schools, and Grande Prairi Public School Division united with Canadian Parents for French and the local ACFA to put forth a proposal in order to receive OLEP funds. Additional partners joined to make the project a further success. The Grande Prairi Public Library, Peace Library System, and the Conseil Scolaire du Nord-Ouest. The application submitted to the provincial government was accepted, and in the fall of 2006, the French Language Resource Center was created with 9 partners. Eventually, the FLRC added 4 more partners: Northwest Regional Learning Consortia, Peace River School Division, High Prairie School Division, and Holy Family Regional Catholic Division. Today, the center continues to enhance French language education in Northwestern Alberta. Our goal is to enhance the delivery of French education in Northwestern Alberta by providing a range of exciting services and educational materials for teachers. This is done through a variety of areas of intervention. In the area of enriched school environment, the FLRC is an official DELF exam center. We offer a minimum of 4 sessions per year, including the DELF Scolaire, Tu Public, and Prime. The FLRC also has 6 DELF passing centers. The impact of this exam is far-reaching in terms of change of pedagogy for teachers and the validation students receive after writing the exam. Continuing within the area of enriched school environment, the center offers an assortment of cultural events such as concerts, author visits, and presentations. These types of events help to provide cultural awareness. Also within the area of enriched school environment, the FLRC has an official partnership with the Académie nationale in France. Through this partnership, we support 3 initiatives. The first is a 2-week job shadow exchange for teachers. The second are virtual partnerships between our schools and the schools within the Académie nationale. The third is a month-long reciprocal exchange program for students. The FLRC also supports exchange programs such as Experiences Canada and Ambrosa, and offers bursaries to schools traveling to French-speaking locations. These types of exchanges and bursaries provide students with authentic learning experiences. In the area of support for educational staff and research, the FLRC works in collaboration with the Northwest Regional Learning Consortium to provide a variety of professional development opportunities to teachers, such as workshops, webinars, and conferences. The center also collaborates with organizers of the Mighty Peace Teachers Convention to provide quality sessions. The FLRC stays current with the latest research to ensure that our teachers are always receiving the best PD possible. The center's biggest initiative is the substantial collection of teacher resources housed here at the Grande Prairi Public Library. As you can see behind me, there are approximately 8,000 resources in this collection. These resources support all subject areas in all grades to teachers teaching in the FSL, Immersion, and Francophone programs. Teachers are able to borrow these resources for 6-week loan periods using the Regional Automation Consortia (TRAC) system. The resources are then delivered to any of the schools within the partnership using a government courier system. These resources are available to all Alberta teachers who have access to TRAC. As this initiative is ever-changing, teachers continually have access to the latest resources. Je vous remercie de votre soutien envers ce projet exceptionnel. Au revoir.
So the next video is provided by the Institute for Innovation in Second Language Education, which is located in Edmonton.
The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of Edmonton Public Schools' OLEP project funding highlights for 2020-2021. Edmonton Public Schools supports French language programming by offering high-quality supports for the teaching and learning of French. The Institute for Innovation in Second Language Education is part of the Curriculum and Learning Supports Department of Edmonton Public Schools. ISLE works in partnership with school leaders, teachers, and experts across central departments to provide a range of supports for K-12 French Immersion and French as a Second Language programs. OLEP-funded project highlights in this presentation include professional learning opportunities, literacy and numeracy in French Immersion, a planning guide for French as a Second Language and French Immersion programs, the provision of language proficiency assessments such as DELF, and maintaining partnerships and the French Resource Centre. The provision of strong professional learning opportunities for French teachers, administrators, and educational leaders continues to build capacity and support innovation in French language programming in the division. Edmonton Public Schools supported a range of professional learning sessions for staff this year. Second Languages Professional Learning Day, hosted online, was attended by 218 division language teachers with 40 sessions on topics such as high-impact instruction, assessment, online teaching and learning, and Indigenous learnings. Resources were developed and supported with teacher training opportunities to maintain high-quality literacy and numeracy programming and interventions for French Immersion students. Division-wide literacy assessments for French Immersion were administered, piloted, and further developed, along with language competency and text complexity frameworks and tools. Consultations with schools took place around reading assessments and resources. A selection of new materials were purchased to support literacy. This year, videos to support math instruction, math center packs, and the French Math Intervention Programming Instrument were developed. consultant support for guided math and first steps for French immersion teachers was provided, and resources were purchased for First Nations Métis and Inuit math connections. Teachers and students have increased supports for high-quality literacy and numeracy programming and interventions. Planning and creating supports is underway to prepare and advocate for the success of all students as some students re-enter French language programs after experiencing disrupted learning in the 2020-2021 school year due to COVID-19. This year, online students enrolled in French as a second language in Edmonton Public Schools were given access to the online application LanguageNut to support their language learning at home. The Planning for Second Language Instruction document was created that includes supports for teachers in welcoming all students back to language programs. The goal is to recover, maintain, and continue to increase the number of students enrolled in French immersion and French as a second language programs. Edmonton Public Schools maintains its commitment to offering the DELF exam to grade 12 students. Administration took place in August for French immersion students with safety guidelines in place. The division continues to offer staff language proficiency assessments offered online this year. ISLE maintains official agreements with national and international partners that support teaching and learning of French. The French Resource Hub and Technology Playground continue to be maintained and enhanced to support teachers in accessing high-quality resources for French language instruction. These are but some of the highlights of how the OLEP-funded project supports French language learning in Alberta. These initiatives and others all address the areas of intervention targets of learner participation, provision of programs, academic achievement of learners, enriched learning environments, and support for educational staff. Edmonton Public Schools continues to lead in its provision and support of high-quality French programming in Alberta.
Next, we have a video from the Metropolitan Edmonton Regional French Immersion Programs, also known as MRFIT.
Good morning. I'm here to share some information with regard to the Metro Edmonton Regional French Immersion Programs, also known as MRFIT, OLEP funding project for the 2020-2021 school year. MRFIT was founded in 1997. The executive is made up of French-speaking representatives from each of the 9 school divisions listed. For the 2020-2021 school year, the executive will have met on 4 separate occasions. MRFIT has a rich history in French immersion in the Metro Edmonton area. Over the course of the past 20+ years, it has supported French immersion teachers and leaders in a variety of ways. For the 2020-2021 school year, MRFIT received approximately $18,000 in OLEP funding. The commitment form submitted to Alberta Education highlighted that MRFIT would target support for education staff. As you can see, the original proposal was to facilitate a variety of collaborative projects between school authorities. However, the impact of the pandemic exceeded our expectations, and as many others, we had to pivot from our original vision. The executive did, however, manage to liaise with a variety of organizations and institutions. Additionally, we have begun working on defining learning intentions and success criteria for each of the language stands at the elementary level. We have also initiated the planning stages of bringing in someone to provide their expertise on the science of reading, as well as proposed the possibility of a collaborative summer institute for French immersion teachers to come together and create resources to support effective second language pedagogical strategies. Furthermore, the executive has curated lists with the intention to purchase of resources, both physical and digital, as well as subscriptions to respond to the local needs. Lastly, the executive organized and facilitated interjurisdictional collaborative working groups for teachers teaching French immersion online. We hope this helps you see how MRFIT is able to support students, teachers, and leaders of the French immersion school divisions in the Metro Edmonton area. Thank you.
We will move on to the final video to be presented today, which was provided by the Southern Alberta French Resource Centre, which is located in Medicine Hat.
Hello, bonjour. I'm Emma. I'm the project lead for the Southeastern Alberta French Resource Centre. I'm standing in front of the Medicine Hat College, where our resources are housed in the Vera Bracken Library. We have 2 bays of activity kits, books, stamps, games, lots of fun stuff. Normally, our community members and our educators are able to access the resources themselves. This year, things are a little bit different, and so they send me an email if they need something from the library. I come to the college, I pick it up, I bring it to one of their schools, and it becomes part of their inter-school mail delivery system. Prairi Rose is one of our 4 partners. They have a thriving French as a second language program, and their geographic area spans over 30,000 square kilometers, which makes it particularly important for our resource center to be able to deliver quality resources to relatively remote areas of southern Alberta. The French Immersion program has existed in Medicine Hat for over 35 years, and École Connaught School is a big part of that history. They have classes from K to 6, as well as an in-house preschool called Au Chapeau. The program is so successful that they became a single track a couple of years ago because the school itself, built in 1912, was bursting at the seams with students. The Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education is another one of our partners. They offer French immersion from preschool to grade 12. As with the other divisions, their French programming is really strong, and we partner with them not only with resources, but also when they offer cultural activities such as Carnaval or Mardi Gras or Cabane à Sucre. Just a little history on the Southeastern Alberta French Language Resource Centre. The inspiration for our centre came from my work on the Provincial Board of Canadian Parents for French, where one of the other directors had been instrumental in starting the French Language Resource Centre in Grande Prairi. I heard reference to the centre often in consultations and meetings around the province and decided I needed to see it for myself. So I went to Grande Prairi and was graciously welcomed by Diana Boisvert, who toured me around the facility and also explained how the centre worked. We decided this is something that we definitely need in southeastern Alberta, where we have a large geographic area, many remote schools, thriving French immersion programs, and of course French as a second language classes. The centre is designed to support students, teachers, education students at the Medicine Hat College, as well as the community at large in any events that support and encourage French language and culture in our community. We offer DELF in our region. We offer the A2 to our French immersion students in grade 6, the B1 in grade 10, and the B2 in grade 12, as well as the A1 to our French as a second language students in grade 6. We have been encouraged this year by the support and the usage of our centre, despite it being an unusual year to begin any project, and we are so thankful for the support that we have received through OLEP. Thank you very much.
In addition to the regular annual funding that is guaranteed, provinces can apply for additional federal funding each year for specific projects or goals. There are 3 categories of applications for additional funding. They include capital projects for minority language education, Francophone and French language teacher recruitment and retention, or TRR projects, and complementary projects. So each year, the federal government issues an annual call for proposals for each of the 3 funding categories described. The dates for the calls for proposals are unfortunately not fixed, and provinces and territories are working with the federal government to develop a comprehensive timeline for future calls for proposals. To submit a provincial application, the Alberta government collaborates with community partners to create and submit a federal application. Community partners may include school authorities, post-secondary institutions, and educational associations. After submitting the application, Alberta works with the federal government to answer its questions and clarify parts of the application as needed. The federal government decides which projects to approve and informs the Alberta government. We then communicate the federal government's decision to stakeholders and help set up next steps for each approved projects. Alberta works closely with funding recipients to create a report for the federal government. This report shows how funding recipients spend the money and if the project meets pre-identified success goals. Like with regular OLEP funding, all funding recipients are required to match any federal funding received through these additional funding categories. Once a project is approved and the schedule finalized and translated into both official languages, Alberta Education posts the schedule to our OLEP webpage. If you're interested in looking at the additional funding projects that have been approved in Alberta since 2018, you can read about them on our OLEP webpage on the Funded Activities section under Additional OLEP Funding. Pan-Canadian official language programs, the Odyssey, Explore, and Destination Clique programs, help young people improve their language skills in English and French. These programs are funded through the Council of Ministers of Education Canada, also known as CMAC, so Alberta does not allocate any of its OLEP funding towards these programs. The Individual Teacher Bursary Program, or ITB, gives eligible teachers up to $2,200 each year for post-secondary courses, training, and professional development in French. Applications for the 2021-22 school year are now open, so please spread the word. For more information and to apply, please visit the ITB webpage located on our OLEP website. The Quebec Student Exchange Program pairs high school students from Alberta with students in Quebec to attend school together for 12 weeks in Alberta and 12 weeks in Quebec. Alberta Education allocates $20,000 of its second language OLEP funding towards this program, and the program is led out of our International Education Services branch here in Alberta Education. Now we're going to review the upcoming reporting requirements and some of the changes that have occurred from last year. I would like to reiterate the importance of this reporting and how much the efforts you have made in completing the new OLEP report forms and funding commitment forms have made a difference. These forms have been critical in the development of the Provincial Action Plan, which is part of the Canada-Alberta multi-year agreement, and in demonstrating the OLEP funds are being used according to the parameters outlined in the protocol. We acknowledge that the change in process can be challenging, but your work is benefiting us all as it plays a key part in securing OLEP funding for the future. Under the terms and conditions of the protocol, these are the new areas of intervention for years 2020 through 2023. The definition of each area of intervention may differ slightly between minority language education and second language instruction. The definitions are provided in Appendix A of the protocol. On the OLEP webpage, in the reporting section under resources, you will also find a fact sheet with the definitions of each area of intervention, along with examples of activities that support each one. We have also built the definitions right into the commitment form and report form, so you don't have to have multiple pages open at once while you complete your forms. I would like to point out that as of 2020, funding recipients can choose to invest federal funding towards one, all, or a combination of the areas of intervention. It is your choice. What works best for your students in your school authority? I would also like to confirm that all federal monies received must be matched by the funding recipient by provincial monies already received through provincial grants. It is also important to note that all federal funding received must be reported back to us to ensure the terms and conditions of the protocol are met. In April of each year, we will advise school authorities of funding allocations for the following school year. As I mentioned earlier, we've already identified this and it is posted on our OLEP website. At the same time, we will release the OLEP funding commitment form, which is due back to the department at the end of June of that same school year. This will tell us how you plan to allocate your funding using the areas of intervention previously discussed and is required in order to receive the first OLEP payment. The OLEP report form for the current school year will also be released in April, which is due in mid-September of the next school year, and will advise if you spent federal funding as previously planned, or if you had to transfer funds between the areas of intervention. The allocation amounts and both forms will be posted to the OLEP webpage in the reporting section under resources. In October, following receipt and approval of the previous school year's report, the department will release the final payment for the previous school year. If the report form for the previous school year and the commitment form for the current school year were submitted and approved, we will then release the initial payment for the current school year in November. Currently, this is set at 80% for both FTE funding and project funding. The funding commitment form secures your school authority's funding for the upcoming school year by establishing a commitment to allocate the OLEP funds according to the terms of the protocol. The first step in completing the commitment form is to find your school authority's total funding allocation for the upcoming school year. As mentioned, this can be found on the OLEP webpage in the reporting section under resources. From there, please complete the commitment form by showing which areas of intervention you plan to allocate the funding and how you plan to match the funding. Recall that all funding recipients are required to match each dollar of OLEP funding received. Our office will be in touch with you after you have submitted the funding commitment form and may follow up with some requests for clarification before approving the form. The information school authorities provide on the report form is critical for Alberta to fulfill its requirement in reporting to the federal government on the province's activities supported by OLEP funding and the matching contributions. After submitting the report, our OLEP office will be in touch with you and may follow up with questions or comments before approving your report. Once your school authority's report is submitted on September 15th and approved, the final 20% payment for the previous school year will be released. Once your school authority's commitment form is submitted on June 30th and then approved, and the report is submitted on September 15th and approved, the initial 80% payment for the current school year will be released. Due to our commitment to the federal government, we are unable to release any new OLEP funding until both reports have been received and approved. If at any point you have questions about completing the form, please feel free to call or email the OLEP office. Our contact information can be found on the form itself or at the bottom of each page on the OLEP website. Now let's look briefly at the OLEP Provincial Advisory Committee. The OLEP Provincial Advisory Committee is comprised of proportional representation of members from diverse geographical regions across the province, including French minority language and second language school authorities, rural and urban school authorities, public and separate school authorities, and officials from Alberta Education. The committee discusses and strategizes direction and leadership to ensure the vitality of Francophone education and French second language programming in Alberta through targeted funding, enriched program delivery, and collaborative action. But it is important to note it is not a decision-making body. Membership is renewed every 2 years, and the process and criteria for new memberships will be made available in the coming weeks in the next ADM email update. We will be looking to fill a number of positions beginning this September, so if you're interested, please keep an eye out for how to indicate your interest in serving on the OLEP PAC team for the next 2 years. If you would like to engage with this information in more depth or learn more about a particular initiative, there's lots of information and resources on the OLEP webpage, including the recording of this session, timelines, forms, and contact information. You can simply Google OLEP Alberta to access it. So this brings us to the conclusion of today's presentation. I will now open the floor to any questions you may have on the information presented today, and I am going to stop sharing my screen. And now I can see you all again. Julie, do we have any questions?
I think, Sarah, did you want to ask your question about the forms?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm just starting to fill out my final report, and I'm just wondering if you could give some examples of what you would expect for the section that says impact on target.
Excellent. And I'm actually going to turn this over to Julie, since she's the one who works most on the forms. Julie.
Sounds good. Thanks. So yeah, the impact on target. And I just want to preface this by saying that we've actually structured the reports really similar to and you'll see the action plan. It's really close. It's really similar. We've tried to really align it with the federal template for the action plan and also the federal template for reports. And so this has come from the federal government, this impact on the targets. And that's something that we're hoping to kind of gather from everyone in the province so that we can amalgamate your responses in our final report to the federal government. So really, that section is taking your activities, it's the impact of all your activities for that initiative and how it impacted your target. So some examples might be, we've had some school authorities on the commitment forms for last year or for this past school year under learner participation say that they're doing collaborative projects with feeder schools to promote transitions between grade levels. So that would be an example of an activity. And then if your target was to increase the number of students in French immersion, that was your activity, you might want to explain how those collaborative projects impacted your target of increasing student enrollment. So there, we do, like the feds really love quantitative data. So if you could talk about, you know, what those projects were, how many schools were involved, how many, whether you had like parent nights, how many nights did you have, how many parents were in attendance, as much as you can collect. And then in that impact section, you'll talk about how these activities increased or allowed us to get on target in these ways. So it's really just being explicit with those links, linking the activities to the target. Because I think that sometimes, and especially like the people in the federal government aren't educators, and it might make sense from an educator perspective as to like, obviously these things helped increase student enrollment, but that section's there to really make it explicit, the link between the activities impacting the target.
Perfect, thank you. Julie, the next question.
Yeah, we have another question. Is the funding that school boards or school authorities require to have to match the federal funding entirely provincial? Or do they have alternative means of funding their French minority language, FSL, French immersion programs?
That is a very interesting question. I think that we'll need to take that back and look at it a little bit.
The only other thing that I can think of, and then Theo might be able to help a little bit with this one, is in-kind contributions are also part of that matching. So I think Theo is like the report master when it comes to these examples. Let me know if I miss anything, but even things like space, right? Like space that you use, equipment, if you have people on salary doing certain work that are using part of their FTE on OLEP projects, that I think that would be part of it as well. If you want to add anything on that too, like other than provincial funding, other ways that they can match.
Yeah, also I would add if there is any sort of like a volunteer activities or someone who's volunteering at school offering free services, because it could evaluate that as a cost as well.
Thank you. Okay, next question, Julie.
I have no other questions in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
So if anyone wants to put themselves out there and ask IRL-ish or in the chat.
I have a question. I'm fairly new to this. On the commitment form that we fill out for the next year, if we are not able to fully, how bound are we to those commitments, especially during COVID, when we report on this?
That is an excellent question. So we develop our action plan each year with everything that's in that commitment form. However, we do have an opportunity at the end of the year to advise the federal government if we've had to make any transfers between the areas of intervention, and we can identify those in the report back. So I will have to look back at the ratified agreement just to see what those timelines are, and we can provide that information on our OLEP website.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we have another question that I can answer. Then thank you for asking this. Do we submit the forms in the Excel format? Yes, please submit us in the Excel format. And this is one thing I've realized already that we need to make explicit and clear. Part of that is because we take all the data and all those numbers that you indicate that you spent and matched for every initiative, we amalgamate every school, there's like 86 of them, into our own Excel sheet. And it's much easier to do that when everyone has submitted in an Excel spreadsheet. Otherwise, when it's PDF, we have to enter them by hand, which you can imagine is so wonderful. So yes, please submit them as an Excel. We've had a couple of forms come in already. If you are unable to add the signature to the signature page, if you want to add that signature page separately as a PDF, that's fine. It's mainly the other pages. And we just also ask that you submit it in its original format. So work on the original downloaded version, just because we have some sections that are, they're locked just because we need that information to stay as it is. And we need those tables to stay as they are so that when we export the data, they all end up in the same place.
Judy, may I just, just want to remind everyone that when you fill up your commitment form, it is required to match the area, but you're not required to match every single initiative in that area. Let's say, for example, you have 3 initiatives in one area, let's say learner participation. So you can put a different amount for each initiative, but in the end, the total of all these initiatives should be the matching number from the OLEP funds. So, and also the purpose of the commitment form, just as a reminder that we will need to have it because it would help us to break down the action plan for 21-22. If you have the chance to look at the 2021 action plan, so we have a detailed initiatives. But for 21-22, we're not able to have those details because we haven't gotten yet the commitment form from the recipients, which is the school divisions. So with your commitment form, it would help us to break down the upcoming school year's action plan.
Thank you, Teo. Are there any questions for any of the other video stories that we saw?
In the chat box, there was a question about point of contact if you do think of any more questions after this. And there is the OLEP email, edc.officiallang@gov.ab.ca. I put that in the chat box. It's also on the OLEP webpage. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. There's a phone number as well. If you want, I'll put that in as well. That's on the OLEP webpage. But generally, the email is the best, and then one of us will respond, and if it sort of warrants a call, like, you want to talk it over, we might be able to give you a call. Or if you just want to shoot an email and say like, hey, I want to talk about this, that's probably the best way. You'll probably get the fastest, most detailed answer. Whoever can best answer your question will call you.
Excellent. Okay. Well, with that, I hope the information that you were provided with today is helpful. Again, if you have any questions or comments following the webinar today, please reach out to us and we will respond to you as soon as possible. And so with that, again, I would like to thank you all for your time. I wish you all well and all the best in finalizing the end of what was a very, very, I'm just going to call it a crazy year. So thank you again for being here, and we are here if you ever need anything in regards to the official languages file. So take care, and we may be chatting soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.